People have always asked why Frank Sinatra let Dean Martin get away with things no one else dared to try. Watch the old Rat Pack footage from the Sands and it jumps off the screen. Frank was the chairman, a man whose approval could open doors and whose anger could shut down rooms. Waiters trembled around him. Politicians leaned in when he spoke. Insulting Frank Sinatra was unthinkable. Even Don Rickles, a professional assassin with words, joked carefully around him. But Dean walked on stage with a cigarette dangling from his lips and a drink in his hand, and went straight for the jugular. He brushed ash onto Frank's tuxedo, shoved him aside, mocked his singing, his height, his romances, even his hair. And Frank didn't retaliate. He laughed. He watched Dean with something close to devotion. The look wasn't tolerance. It was gratitude. The reason had nothing to do with comedy timing or stage chemistry. It came from one night so dark it never made the highlight reels. A freezing night in the early 50s, when Frank Sinatra wasn't a legend but a broken man. A night when his career had collapsed. His voice had betrayed him, and life itself no longer seemed worth holding on to. On that night, when Frank was on his knees in a lonely apartment with nothing left, Dean Martin was the only person who reached down and pulled him back. Frank didn't just owe Dean laughs or loyalty. He owed him breath. To understand it, you have to erase the myth and rewind time. Forget the Sinatra of sold-out arenas and victory anthems. Go back to the years no one likes to remember. In the 1940s, Frank Sinatra had been untouchable. Teenagers screamed. Records flew off shelves. He was the sound of a generation. Then America shifted. Tastes hardened. The war ended. The country wanted something louder, sharper, younger. Sentimentality fell out of fashion almost overnight. Then the nightmare arrived. On stage at the Copacabana, Frank reached for a note, and his voice failed him. Not a crack, not a mistake, a hemorrhage. His throat closed, and the sound simply vanished. The room froze. What followed wasn't sympathy, but silence, the kind that signals an ending. The press pounced. The same voices that once praised him now declared him finished. His label dropped him. His agent walked away. The movie studio let him go. One by one, the pillars holding up his life collapsed. Frank wandered New York like a ghost. He stared up at marquees that no longer carried his name. New singers took his place. Younger faces, new sounds, and everywhere he looked there was Dean Martin, smiling, successful, loved. While Frank was disappearing, Dean was ascending, riding a wave of fame so strong it felt cruel by comparison. The humiliation cut deep, the jealousy, the fear of being erased. Frank wasn't just losing work, he was losing identity. Music wasn't what he did, it was who he was. And without it, there was nothing solid left to stand on. Those years hollowed him out, pushing him toward a place where despair stopped being dramatic and became quiet, practical, final. That was the night Dean stepped in. Not with jokes, not with advice, with presence, with loyalty, with their refusal to let Frank fall all the way through. And once you understand that, everything else makes sense. Every joke Dean made at Frank's expense wasn't disrespect. It was earned. It was paid for in the darkest currency there is. Frank laughed on stage because he knew the truth. He wasn't being mocked by a clown. He was being teased by the man who had saved his life. But the collapse of his career was only part of the poison eating away at Frank Sinatra. The deeper wound had a name, and it was Ava Gardner. Frank didn't simply love Ava. He was obsessed with her. She was breathtaking, dangerous, fearless. She drank as hard as he did, swore as freely, and fought with the same ferocity. For her, he abandoned his wife and his children. He shattered his clean image, scandalized his faith, and burned bridges he could never rebuild. And Eva gave him passion in return, but never safety. Their relationship was chaos. When it was good, it crackled with electricity. When it was bad, it was annihilating. Ava was fiercely independent. She refused to be owned, and Frank, a man who needed control to feel alive, couldn't survive that freedom. By 1952, with his career in ruins, Frank became desperate. He borrowed money just to shower her with jewelry, trying to purchase love because he believed he had nothing else left to offer. Ava saw the weakness and recoiled. She had her own rising career. She wasn't going to sink with a man the world had already written off. The breakups were violent and theatrical. Frank threatened to kill himself. He fired guns into mattresses. He swallowed pills and called friends at the last possible moment. It wasn't manipulation. It was a man screaming for help after losing the only thing that told him who he was. And on this particular night, in late 1952, Ava wasn't answering. The papers were whispering about another man. Frank was alone in New York. No gigs, no money, no voice, no future. He sat on the edge of the bed in his undershirt and slacks, unshaven, hollowed out. Empty bottles littered the apartment. Ashtrays overflowed. Scripts lay unopened. Cheap B-movie offers he couldn't even land anymore. He stared into the mirror and didn't recognize the face staring back. The famous blue eyes were dull, bloodshot. The cheeks were sunken. He looked like someone already halfway gone. A voice inside him hissed the truth he feared most. You're finished? You're nothing. You stayed too long and the party moved on without you. He walked barefoot into the kitchen, the cold linoleum shocking his skin. His eyes drifted to the oven. The story has lived in whispers for decades. Some say it was a gun, others say pills. But the version that fits that night best was gas, quiet, clean, no spectacle, just sleep. He turned the knob. A soft hiss filled the room. A snake. He slid down to the floor, pulled his knees to his chest, and closed his eyes. He thought of his children. He thought of Ava. He thought of the applause that would never come again. He felt oddly calm. The world didn't need him anymore. Time blurred. The air grew heavy. His head spun. Darkness crept in, warm and forgiving, promising relief from shame and failure. And then, through the fog, came a sound. A violent pounding bung. 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 Frank ignored it. He didn't want interruption. He wanted rest. The pounding grew louder. A voice cut through the haze, rough and familiar, soaked in smoke and whiskey. Frankie, open the damn doors. It wasn't the police. It wasn't a landlord. It was Dean. Frank tried to stand, but his legs betrayed him. The pounding didn't stop. The door burst open. Dean didn't smile. He didn't crack a joke. He smelt the gas instantly. He stormed past Frank into the kitchen, twisting the knobs shut, throwing open the window and letting freezing New York air rush in, tearing the poison out of the room. Frank collapsed in the hallway, coughing, sobbing, broken beyond dignity. Dean came back, grabbed him by the shoulders, and held him upright. He dragged him into the living room and dropped him onto the sofa. He didn't comfort him yet. He didn't soften his voice. "What the hell are you doing?" Dean said. There was no anger in it, only fear. And fear was something Dean Martin almost never allowed himself to show. He hid it behind calm, but the fear was real. "I'm finished, D." Frank broke down, burying his face in his hands. "I'm finished. It's over. She's gone. The voice is gone. I got nothing left." Dean scanned the apartment. The mess, the emptiness, the bottles, the silence. And in that moment, he understood how close he had come to losing his friend forever. Dean moved to the sideboard and found a bottle that still had some life in it. He poured 2 glasses and pressed one into Frank's shaking hand. "Drink," he said, not harshly, but with authority. Frank swallowed. The burn cut through the fog in his head. Dean sat across from him, lit a cigarette, and passed it over. "You're not finished," Dean said quietly. Frank laughed bitterly and gestured at himself. "Look at me. I'm a wreck. I'm borrowing money to eat. MGM won't even let me through the gate. I'm a joke." Dean shrugged. "So you're down. Biggie deal. You think you're the first man to get knocked flat? I shoveled coal back in Steubenville. I dealt cards to killers for $5 a night. Being broke ain't the end. It's just another day." "It's different for you," Frank snapped. "You're funny. People love you." "I'm supposed to be the voice? Without that, I'm nothing." Dean leaned in, and when he spoke, his certainty filled the room. "You're Frank Sinatra." "You're not nothing. You're the best singer God ever made. Maybe you're hurting. Maybe your heart's cracked wide open. But you're still you." "Ava," Frank whispered. Dean shook his head. "Forget Ava. She's a storm, Frank. You don't grab a storm and expect it to stay. Let her go. You gotta get back up." Frank looked at him and saw something he hadn't seen in years. Not pity, respect, belief. Dean reached into his jacket and pulled out his checkbook. He wrote quickly and slid it across the table. "Rent, clothes, a shave. You look terrible." Frank bristled. "I don't want charity." "It ain't charity," Dean said. "It's a loan. You'll pay me back." "With what?" Frank muttered. "With work," Dean replied. "That war picture. The one you keep talking about. From here to eternity," Frank said. "They don't want me. Make them want you. Take nothing if you have to. Just get in the door." Dean stayed the whole night. He didn't leave Frank alone for a second. They finished the bottle. They talked about the old days, about music, about anything that kept the darkness back. Dean cracked dumb jokes until, finally, Frank laughed. No miracle happened. The pain didn't vanish. Ava didn't come back. But something far more important did. Dean reminded Frank who he was. The next morning, Frank didn't turn the gas back on. He packed a bag. He took the check. Hey, flew west. He walked into a studio office and humbled himself. He fought for the role of Angelo. He agreed to work for almost nothing, and when he got the part, he poured every ounce of pain, hunger, and fury he had left into it. When Maggio died on screen, it wasn't performance. It was Frank Sinatra executing the man he used to be. He wasn't pretending to break. He was breaking for real. When the Academy Award came, it wasn't just recognition. It was resurrection. Records sold again. Film offers returned. He signed with Capitol Records and rebuilt himself from the ground up, trading soft crooning for sharp swing, creating the sound that would define an era. He didn't just come back. He came back stronger than anyone thought possible. He became the chairman. He became the most powerful entertainer of his time. But he never forgot that apartment, that night, or the man who stood between him and oblivion. That is why the Rat Pack worked. People reduce it to booze and jokes, but it was never that shallow. It was a brotherhood forged in collapse and survival. Frank was the leader, the engine, the fighter. But Dean was the weight, the ballast, the one man Frank never tried to dominate because he's COULDN. Single quotes. Dean was the only person Frank truly saw as his equal. Frank let Dean humiliate him on stage because it was grounding, because it reminded him where he came from. Every joke was a tether. Every ash flicked onto his tuxedo said the same thing. Don't forget the kitchen floor. Frank, don't forget how close you came. Don't forget who you are. And Frank didn't resent it. He needed it. Years later, on stage in St. Louis, Frank stopped the show. No punch line. No swagger. He put his arm around Dean and told the audience the truth. He said, "This man is my right arm. Without him, I can't swing." It wasn't banter. It was confession. A debt acknowledged in public that could never be repaid in private. The cruel irony is that while Dean saved Frank, Frank could not save Dean. When Dean's son died and Dean retreated into silence, Frank tried everything. He called. He pushed. He built the reunion tour like a lifeline and threw it into the dark. But Dean's darkness wasn't the same. Frank wanted to fight his way back. Dean was finished fighting. Dean chose stillness, and no one, not even Frank Sinatra, could pull him out of that choice. When Dean Martin died in 1995, Frank was shattered. The press asked him for words. The man who built an empire on language had nothing left. All he said was that Dean was his brother, not by blood, but by choice. Those words carried a lifetime. There are stories that near the end, when dementia softened Frank's grip on Chimmy, he would call for Dean. He would ask where Dino was, ask if he was coming by, say they needed to talk. Maybe in those moments, Frank wasn't lost at all. Maybe he was back in that cold apartment, waiting for the knock that once saved his life. Everyone needs a Dean Martin. Everyone reaches a night where the darkness feels permanent. In those moments, lectures are useless. Judgment is poison. What saves people is presence. Someone who kicks the door open, shuts off the danger, pours a drink, and reminds you that you still matter. Frank Sinatra became the greatest singer of all time. But he would not have become that man without Dean Martin. Because Dean didn't just save a career. He saved a life. And in doing that, he gave the world its soundtrack. That is the legacy, not the tuxedo, not the jokes, not they. Cool. But the quiet moment when one man chose not to let another disappear.